Good morning, Urban Yoga family. This is Leo Bray on behalf of Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center in Palm Springs. Please visit us online at urbanyoga.org or Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center on Facebook. Check out our schedule. We have classes every day online, 5 days a week, locally in person in Palm Springs, in the northeast corner of Ruth Hardy Park near the school. You can join us there Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 8:15 or Sunday at 9:45 with Kristen. Different teachers every day over there. Nice variety. Great people show up in person and on Zoom for our classes. You can also online see there's a tip jar where you can contribute to support our classes via Zelle or Venmo or PayPal. And if you show up at the park, you're welcome to make cash donations. This morning, nobody came to the Zoom class, so what we do then is we make a shorter video. So this will be a shorter segment, just talking about some different pranayama breath exercises or breath techniques that we can use for self-regulation. Self-regulation can mean physical or other kinds of regulation. So we talk about using yoga practice to help de-stress or prevent stress. There's different ways we can use different types of breathing to regulate ourselves in different ways. We usually start a practice by coming to quiet stillness and just observing the breath to let it slow down and get deeper. This in itself is some self-regulation. I just close my eyes. We often do that. You're never required to close your eyes. For some, that's not comfortable to do so. But simply focusing on the breath allows it to slow down and get deeper. And this helps us tap into some feedback loops. As our breathing slows down, the muscles in the body begin to relax more and more. As the body relaxes and the breathing slows down, the mind tends to quiet. Closing the eyes can help quiet the mind by reducing sensory input. So slower, deeper breathing helps the mind and helps the body. And these things are all interconnected. A quieter mind helps the breathing slow down and helps the body relax. A relaxed body helps the breathing slow down and the mind slow down. Becoming still and slowing down helps us to ground and to settle and to prepare for whatever practice we're going to lead into. Today, it will simply be some breath practice. No postures or movements to track, no cues of that nature. It's a little chilly here in Palm Springs this morning. It was 55 Fahrenheit, but it was windy. We can use our breath to regulate our body temperature. So some ways to do that. If you're chilly, you can warm yourself up by, the most obvious one would be to breathe faster. But subtler ways, you can, without speeding things up, use your breath to warm your body using what we call ujjayi breath, the oceanic breath or whisper breath. It's a constricting of the muscles in the throat. And you might think of it as, some people call it in a lighthearted way, call it the Darth Vader breath. You might think of it as like if you want to pretend to snore, if you were imitating a snorer, it's just the beginning of that, or the beginning of like the sound of clearing your throat without going quite that far. Just, I'm exaggerating the sound of my breath as it would do if there were students in the room with me, because the microphone is maybe 8 feet away from where I am. So just a constriction in the back of your throat. If you were practicing in the room with other people, you'd say, make the sound loud enough that the person on the next mat, a safe 6 feet away, can hear you. So those breaths were just as long and deep and slow as the quieter breaths that I was doing before. By constricting the throat and engaging ujjayi, the whisper breath, the oceanic breath, creating a vibration in the throat, I'm actually raising my body temperature. I can feel myself warm up. And so breathing like that, you could breathe like that throughout a practice or through different segments of a practice, and continuing to constrict your throat as the air moves in and out warms the body up. Now, sometimes in the course of a practice, often in this 8:15 morning flow class, we'll get a bit vigorous. Yesterday, we played around with crow pose and side crow, and these are some very warming things. Even tree pose, standing on one leg, or doing several sun salutations in a row will warm the body up. And sometimes, just as we get cooler than we want to be, we get warmer than we want to be. We get heated up even sometimes. You can use your breathing to lower your body temperature. The way to do this is to exhale through the mouth. That's always going to decrease the body temperature. And this too can be exaggerated if you take clearing breaths, a more forcible exhale with some sound like a sighing sound or whatever sound wants to be released. This can cool you off. We often call these clearing breaths or cooling breaths, cleansing breaths. You can further exaggerate this release, this cooling down, by doing what we call lion's breath. There are a lot of things in yoga we name for animals. And if you've ever seen big cats in the wild, or even a small cat you might have in your house, cats will do this thing with sticking their tongue out as they exhale. This cools even further. We call that lion's breath. Maybe you feel silly doing it. Maybe if you're on Zoom, you feel less silly. You could be muted. You could even have your camera off, and then no one's going to see or hear you. Personally, I got used to pretty quickly making these sounds in classes. But yes, as a new yogi at the YMCA in Dorchester, Massachusetts, I was a little self-conscious about making these sounds, despite the teacher making all these crazy sounds and some of the other people around me. I soon joined in the loud yogi club and make all kinds of sounds. And people have different preferences around this. Some people don't like to make so much noise. Find what's right for you. But the sound does help in releasing excess heat. And the sticking the tongue out. Your tongue is this big muscle full of blood vessels. Sticking it out helps you cool off. Think of like dogs. I was taking the dogs to the park this morning. We're playing fetch. And as the dogs heat up, the tongue hangs out of their mouth. The tongue swells. This is like the dog's radiator, helps them cool. Yeah. Other ways we can use breathing for self-regulation is by changing how long the inhales or exhales are in the breath. So lengthening the inhale increases oxygen supply to the body. Lengthening the exhale can help de-stress. Think of it as a relief valve, like blowing off steam. So you can count how long your inhale is and how long your exhale is. Another way that you can self-regulate is to make the counts the same. You might breathe in at a count of 4 and breathe out at 5, or vice versa. You might find when you first count that it's uneven. So you can use the counting first to just let your breath flow naturally, but observe how long is the inhale, how long is the exhale. And you can work at equalizing, making them the same. From there, you could work at increasing by a count of 1. So say you get to inhale 5, exhale 5. Do that for a few rounds, then inhale for 6, and exhale for 6, and do that for a few rounds. And you can keep going up to a certain point and get some really long, deep breaths. And really get a lot more oxygen into the body, with longer exhales, getting more waste product out of the body. Much of the waste that we eliminate from our bodies actually is carried out by water vapor in our exhalations. So you can just count and play with different things. De-stressing is certainly a very handy thing to do. And no matter what the count is, if you can consistently make the exhales longer than the inhales, you will feel a difference. You might even feel very profound things. You can feel your shoulders melt away from your ears, your shoulder blades come down your back, your neck untense. We carry a lot up here, a lot of excess tension we carry in here. And often as we calm down and slow down and focus on the breathing, that's the first thing you notice. Like you might be like this when you start, and with some focus on the breath, the shoulders come to this nice relaxed posture. Before I began practicing habitually, my default posture was probably a little more like this. If I think about recreating it, and over time my shoulder girdle has relaxed a bit. And having this posture isn't about drawing my shoulders back. This is stiffness. I'm clenching here. But over time, we can undo some of this habitual rounding. And yes, there are movement practices we can do that help with that. But even just the breathing, you can work changes from the inside out, from the breath outward into the musculature, into the skeleton, into the connective tissues. Focusing on the breath is the beginning. And there are so many different ways we can direct the breath from there. Pranayama is one of the 8 limbs of yoga. We usually focus here in the US on asana, which is the movement practice. But that's just 1/8 of the practice of yoga. It's an 8-limbed path. So there's some pranayama for you today. Some days we don't have an hour to give to a practice. We have less time. And so at Urban Yoga, we like to provide these shorter videos so that when you go to YouTube and you want to do something with us and maybe you don't have an hour, you have some choices there. So it can be handy when you search for yoga videos to know how much time you have in your day, and you can go and find a video that fits the time you've been able to carve out for yourself today for practice. So I'll leave it at that today and let this be a nice short one for those days when you're pressed for time and want to have some practice, want to practice some self-care, in this case, some self-regulation. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. The light within me sees and honors that same light within you. Namaste.